Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Education and Skills Corporate Delivery Committee meeting of the 26th of April, 2023. I was aiming to get to the Gloucester room today, but the traffic was impossible. So rather than taking any risks, I thought it was better to stay online. So jumping into the agenda, item number 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
From Lyndon Jones at the moment, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Do we have any? And then we move on to item number 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. So can I ask members to go through them page by page? Page 1, page 2, and page 3. If you were content, I will approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record.
I move, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sam. And I just noted on my notes here, a couple of little scribbles that I put on here, and one of the notes was, as we move towards the next agenda item number 4, was the need for us to get together, for myself to meet with Sarah Jones. We were both going on holidays, and we managed to get an early meeting in, not long after the last CDC, which was great. So we move on to agenda item number 4, which is the report of the meetings that we've had in the municipal year: leadership, inclusion and governance, building excellence in Swansea schools. So can I pass on to officers to take the lead on this agenda item, please? Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. So this report really is for the committee to consider really a summary of the work that's been undertaken over the last 6 months or so, really. The first section was around leadership in Swansea schools and some of the challenges around that, and also some of the positive work. There was significant discussion at the time, and the committee sort of gave some feedback that was taken on board, and following that, a senior leaders and head teacher handbook was finalised. So it was in early draft at that stage. So that document is now ready for final publication. It's a live document, so that means that head teachers can access it at any time, and it will always have the latest information that they need in order, to conduct their day-to-day work. So David Thomas led on that topic item. There's 2 senior leader development sessions that have been organised for May and June, so that will also help to support training and development for senior leaders, and the development of a new leadership support strategy has been included in the new corporate plan, which has been agreed now, which is now public. So that's sort of really summarising the leadership element. And then the second work plan topic was attendance and inclusion. So that started off really with just a general overview around inclusion and the new inclusion strategy, which will be shared with Cabinet shortly. And there was a key priority within that, which was around promoting attendance. And so the committee discussed a lot of the challenges around attendance. There was a number of factors that contributed to that, and there was a lot of discussion around that and how collectively we support learners really in order to promote good attendance. So Helen Howells, then the officer, then developed an action plan which was shared with the committee, and as part of that, the intention to develop an attendance policy. So an attendance policy has now been drafted, and that will now then be shared for further consideration and adoption if Cabinet are happy. And then the third item then was around strengthen and effective school governance. So the officer there was Jeff Fish, and he talked around the significant change in context and the huge role really that school governors play in with our schools. And again, he put together a work plan which was discussed and considered by the committee. So obviously, with that being the latest one, there's no sort of significant move forward from that. But again, there was some timescales and a work plan that was agreed in the last meeting. So that really is the report in summary, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. As I say, thank you in particular for making the time before you went on holiday to pull these different strands together. I know there's something we're very keen to ensure that we made progress with. And just to add to what you said, as I'm looking at the screen to see if there are hands up, Gareth, can you please let me know if people want to speak in the room? And what we took the view early on in the year that we'd have a very clear focus, that we'd have a work plan which was very robust, that we started off with an education information update, which really set a foundation for the year. We looked at 2 meetings for strengthening school leaders, 2 meetings for attendance and inclusion, and 2 meetings for strengthened and effective school governance. And what I really appreciated in the year was the robust approach that committee members took to each of those committee meetings, and especially having the feedback from officers. And I think this is a real good example of officers and councillors on the committee working very closely and collaboratively, I'll say the word in a minute, collaboratively on taking forward some very important policy areas for education in Swansea. Committee members, anybody like to offer a comment?
If I could, Chair.
Yes, carry on, Mike.
Yeah,
Thank
a
you.
couple of points within the 3 items. If we can perhaps have some clarification on officers. In regards to 211, regarding the handbook and that for the new and acting ed teachers, and obviously the process for Swansea and local processes for Swansea ed teachers, including finance, premises management, and HR, etc. Could it possible perhaps we could include procurement in that? I tell you why, Chair, because I sit in the Audit and Governance Committee, and when our internal auditors was going into schools, the main issue that was jumping out at them was understanding the procurement process. And in fact, it was in the percentage of 32%. So as we have had a few ed teachers and chairs of governors actually come in front of us because they received a moderate report. So just if that is a possibility, I don't know what the views of you are.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. That is that offers insight for me, certainly. Can I ask officers for a comment on that? Is that something that would be relevant, Helen?
Yeah, procurement advice, as far as we're concerned, is a statutory requirement that local authorities have to offer schools. Obviously, the advice on procurement doesn't sit with education, it sits in a different directorate. So as a directorate, we are wholly supportive of advice and guidance being provided to our schools on procurement, but it's not in my gift to say whether that resource is available and willing to do so.
Does that help, Mike?
Well, is there any way that perhaps your department can perhaps liaise with the appropriate, if it's building services or whatever, because I would imagine we might well be paying into a service level agreement for this as well. Do you know what I mean? But it's just so we can sort of get this sort of area because quite a lot of the work that comes through with the local authority is done to schools, so they are one of the main sort of players there. This is why I flagged it up, really, Chair, you know, for this to have some sort of actual support for the schools going forward, you know.
Right, thank you, Mike. I think before I ask Helen to come back in, there seems there's 2 things going on there. There's separate functions in the council, but in the context of Swansea head teachers, we have that focus for heads and chairs of governors on finance and premises management. And you were saying you think it would help to add value if we nudge people to become more acutely aware of the procurement rules. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, that's correct, because all schools are audited, and as I say, but this obviously, you know, understanding the actual process and procedure, you know, what the procurement rules are.
As it relates directly to each school.
Well, one of the recommendations from the procurement inquiry panel, which I sat on as well, was that perhaps information could be sent out from perhaps the education department that the schools could set up as part of the premises committee to include procurement as well. But I don't know whether that advice has been taken up or sent out to schools yet.
Right, Helen.
Yeah, in terms of the services provided by commercial services, they are there to provide advice and guidance to schools on procurement. So that would rest with them. But there has been a joint piece of work around producing that joint guidance between education and commercial services on procurement advice to schools. So I guess the detail on taking forward those recommendations you refer to, Councillor White, in your inquiry, those details may sit with commercial services, and I wouldn't like to answer on their behalf.
Right.
So
Can I try to be
yes, go on,
helpful
Councillor
here?
Smith.
Would there be, given that document exists, Helen, would there be a way of signposting that within this handbook? And referring to it and telling the school leaders that they need to refer to that for the correct advice on procurement.
Yeah, it's just a couple of words, isn't it? And it's a sentence we can include in the handbook because it's a live document that's going to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis. It's not a static document, so we can add that so long as the form of words is agreed.
Yeah, because we don't want to duplicate what corporate is it corporate services you said?
Commercial services.
We don't want to duplicate what commercial services are saying, and neither do we want to include information that might become out of date in a handbook. But I think a link to another, from one live document to another live document, would probably be the way to do it.
There we go. That makes sense to me. Councillor White, Mike, is that okay?
Yes, so this is just that, you know, we've got that sort of transparency then of how the system should be functioning, and I think that would give the confidence to all schools as well, you know.
Excellent, thank you, Mike. Anyone else indicating in the room? I can't see any hands up online.
Mike, can I just pass
Yes,
on
go on,
my
Jan.
thanks? Can I just pass on my thanks to all the officers who have helped us through this year in the CDC, and to you yourself for the way you've conducted it. So just pass on my thanks to everybody. Thank you. Thank
you, Jan. It's very much appreciated. I think one of my notes before hands go up here, one of my notes here is that we've seen, as Sarah alluded to, the input of a number of officers here, and all of them have really added great value, and the challenge and information they presented have been picked up in detail by the elected members in the committee, and then the officers have gone back and responded very positively and proactively, and I think that's the way these things should work. So it's just very good practice, I think. Thank you.
There's
two councillors
in the room. Who's first, please?
I think Councillor White under come in, Chair.
Okay, go on, Mike.
Yeah, can I send, as I say, under section 3, attendance and inclusion, in regards to the education welfare services, is there any way, perhaps, of working with the EWOs working within the within clusters of schools? It might be a funding or perhaps a staffing issue, but I'm thinking of, you know, within the sort of primaries and the comp, you probably would have siblings, so you might well have a pattern families where we might have got some issues of concern. But I don't know whether whether it could be worked that EWOs would work within cluster schools. I don't know what Helen's views are on that.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, it's a good point, Councillor White. Unfortunately, our resources don't stretch to having one EWO per cluster at the moment, and there's a division really of responsibilities in terms of statutory role of the EWO and some of the project work schools would like them to undertake. So what we're trying to do is review our whole education welfare service. So that piece of work is likely to happen in the next few months anyway. So as much as we'd like to have somebody working one per cluster, I don't think our resources can stretch that far. But we have held head teacher workshops to canvass their opinions, really, of what kind of model they would prefer. And so long as we keep within the bounds of our statutory functions around EWS, Education Welfare Service, being met, I think we can come up with a happy medium, so to speak.
Lovely, thank you, Helen. Councillor Joy?
Thanks, sorry. I just wondered whether we could have access to this new document, the Head Teacher and Senior Leader Handbook, whether we would be allowed to see that link at all.
Helen?
Yes, of course. I think we've sent it out in a draft form to our schools and invited feedback from them. So we've had some feedback already. So as I said earlier, it's a live document. It's not a perfect piece of work, Councillor Joy, but more than happy to share the link with you.
Thank you. I think the point with education is that it's so fast moving, isn't it? It's difficult to keep on track, and a live document is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, that's right. I think we made that a similar point in the previous committee meeting, that it needs to be as interactive as possible and as mobile and flexible as required in a very liquid and challenging environment. Have we got any other councillors? I think we had Mike White and Sandra Joy in the room. Anybody else indicating?
None other in the room, Chair, thanks.
Nobody else in the room, and I can't see any online here. So please shout out if I've missed anything. I don't think I have. The one comment I had under section 4.4, there was a varied font, Sarah. Some little glitch in the font on it might have been the way I printed it, I don't know. But 4.4, the second paragraph, we went from one kind of font to a different one. Minor little glitch there. So the recommendation is on the front page there. It's recommended that the draft report be approved and referred to Cabinet, and the Cabinet approve the policy development set out under section 5 of the report. And section 5 says it's recommended that the following actions are approved so that they may be developed and shared with stakeholders by the end of the academic year.
Chair, I think Councillor White wants to come in, and then I'd like to come in after
Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. My third and last question, if possible, in regards to 4.5, the training for governors. In regards to new governors, is there any way that we could perhaps look at introducing an induction day within the school for new governors? So, before they sort of get dropped in the deep end straight into a governor's meeting. Plus, if we could perhaps have a system where we could have an induction session, not necessarily a full day, but just an induction sort of a little sort of taster, so they know exactly what the role of the governor is. It's just a thought, really, Chair. I thought it might be useful.
Good question. Thank you, Mike. Helen?
Yeah, I'm sure that can be woven into the recruitment of new governors. Certainly it happens quite a lot. I know I'm more familiar with LA governance appointments. And certainly we know that there's evidence that people have visited the school, but having maybe more formality around half a day's induction, whatever is suitable for the school, or a whole day over a course of a number of sessions makes sense in my book. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important. It doesn't have to be very long at all. It'd be nice just to welcome people, to say hello, so that make no assumptions that the new governor knows who the head is, and other staff who may be present at the time available just to say hello, literally to say hello, and to look and to say hello to the school secretary and office staff, with the people who will have main contact with the governors, perhaps organising meetings, etc. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it's not on that item specifically, but in relation to item 5, because I think you'd come to item 5.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank the officers for preparing this report, and I think it's an excellent summary of the discussions that have taken place in this committee. On item 5.1, I think it will enable us to make use of these discussions in moving forward with some concrete items going to cabinet. So just want to express my thanks to all involved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. It's very much appreciated, and I think it's a unanimous feeling in the committee. You know, it's a very positive experience, I think. So on 5.1, we've got the recommended that the following actions are approved so that they may be developed by the end of the academic year. Now, I had a question mark here about the time frame, and I wouldn't want anybody to feel you know, burdened or overburdened, and the overburden is never a good idea. But the time frame was my question there. But the new head teacher and senior leader handbook is published. A new Swansea attendance policy to underpin the work of the attendance objective of the inclusion strategy, and a strategy to support the recruitment and retention of school governors. So those are the three key strands. Helen?
Yeah, on the final one, that's probably the one that's least developed. But I think during the course of the next half term, it will be ready. I've received a draft of the new policy for attendance today, so I'm confident that will be ready by the end of, before the end of the academic year. Indeed, it should be ready around the end of May. Then obviously the inclusion policy is the overarching policy, or I think we call it the inclusion strategy, and the policy for attendance sits within that strategy. That particular strategy is going to cabinet on the 18th of May anyway, but it's the policy really that this particular committee focused on around attendance, so that would be available. And as you said, the leadership handbook has gone out in draft overheads by now anyway. So over the course of the last year, we've achieved a lot, so thank you.
So just to be clear, the attendance policy, will that be going to cabinet as part of the inclusion strategy, or will be a separate document?
Separate document, Councillor Smith.
Right, and they both be going to cabinet over the summer, will they?
Yes, because I guess if this particular report goes to cabinet, this draft report that we're discussing today, it would make sense really that we include the new attendance policy, the relevant documentation with this report, so they appear as appendices. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, that we take this as the main report, as the body of the report, but with the attendance policy and the strategy to support the recruitment and retention of governors, and potentially, I don't know what the position of the school leader handbook, but certainly those two could go in as appendices to this going into a cabinet report.
Helen?
Would that work?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I absolutely concur with Cabinet Member there, because I don't think there's any haste in taking this to Cabinet, because we've concluded the municipal year now. It's about making sure we've got a robust report to take to Cabinet. So if the committee members agree the draft report today and agree that we wait until we've got the product, the actual policies already together in the same place before putting it on a Cabinet agenda, I think that makes eminent sense.
Yeah, I think that's the best way forward. Thanks. Yeah,
absolutely. Very clear approach. Committee members, do we have any other comments, any other queries, suggestions, questions? I always pick on Sam at this point. If he goes quiet, I wonder why. Sam, only teasing. Any comments, Vice Chair?
Well, seeing as you called me Mike, no, I'd be brief. The only thing I would just say is that I think it's been really encouraging in terms of what we've done, in terms of the steps that we've made. I would like to echo the thanks that Jan Curtis gave both to officers, and I know we've seen a number of different officers who've come in and prepared reports and delivered reports. So I would like to extend thanks to the work for the officers and as well, Chair, for the work that you've done. But I think it's been a really constructive year in terms of that sort of cooperative or collaborative working that has been able to really deliver on and look at and to achieve the work plan. So I would like to just thank everybody for their participation.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Sam. And did I see Councillor Jardine's hand go up?
You did, but I'm not sure. Okay.
Okay.
What I was going to ask is to do with the policies and the attendance policies. That a couple of schools that I'm certainly governor of, and people I've spoken to recently, schools are finding that since COVID, parents, the attendance has dropped for a lot of schools, simply because we are still quite afraid, I'll put it that way, of COVID. So with the least thing, and I know one of the schools is struggling with, should I send letters out? Should I pull out the big stick? This child has missed a good 3 months of schooling so far. So I was just wondering, will the policy take that into account? And is there anything we can do? Because I'm not sure, we can have policies we can force, but if mum genuinely feels, I don't want my child to go to school, then where does that leave us? That really, I suppose, is my.
Thank you, Yvonne. It is a sensitive area. Helen?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jardine. Very important question, really, in terms of how supportive we are and what value do we place on attendance. And obviously, in my mind, as Director of Education, if we don't have learners attend schools, then they can't begin to have the right attitudes for learning for life, and they can't begin to access the curriculum at the earliest opportunity to make sure that they are equipped and skilled for the future in terms of their aspirations, their occupations and careers. So attendance is absolutely pivotal. It's the first cornerstone really in education that I always consider to be most important. So when you look at the 190 days of school days in a calendar year, it's not much, is it, compared to 365. So across Swansea, if you look at our primary schools, it's just above 90%. But when we take a deep dive and look at individual school levels, we can see some primary schools are dipping below 88% there, and in some instances below that as well. But for me, it's the individual learner that counts. We can look at the data, but it's the effect on the child. So if a child is only in school for 90% of the time, they've potentially lost, out of 190 days, 19 days. And that's quite a stark reminder, really, of the days lost and what they could have had if they'd been in school. And we took a very supportive stance during the pandemic. So there is a fine balance to be struck from moving from pandemic times to current expectations. But if we don't do it soon, some of these learners will never recover. They will never recover from the effects of the pandemic. So I think it's incumbent upon us to be kind in a way, to ensure that learners and parents in particular are reminded of the importance, and our policy will make it clear really the effects of the loss of education and how that stacks up for an individual learner. And for me, that's the most important thing.
Thanks, Helen. I was wondering, would the policy do that? Because this particular child I have in mind, between September and now, I think he's lost something like 2 weeks. So, to me, that's a lot. But thanks very much for your answer.
Thanks, Helen. I think that what the sense is that we take a very supportive child-friendly approach, and we communicate sensitively, acknowledging the fears that people might have. But as Helen says, if you're not in school, then the likelihood of learning is significantly reduced, and the long-term impact can be devastating. So it's a fine line, as you say, Yvonne. You're right. It's a difficult one. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Okay, I'm going to be a bit out of order.
Don't be out of order, but ask your questions.
Sensitive. Sometimes I feel, as we all agree, the child is what matters. So should we be a bit more? No, this is, I don't know. Is there a way of encouraging, making parents put the child first. You know, so
I think that's a very challenging area. It's a very difficult one, but Helen thankfully put her hand up.
Yeah, I mean, parental engagement is absolutely key to a school's success, and we've got varying degrees of how that's achieved in Swansea. It's not a consistent picture, and I think the schools that invest in engaging with their parents really come out with good outcomes, better attendance, improved attendance. But it's hard work, isn't it? It's hard work on top of the day job when you're there to ensure that education is achieved for learners, and you still have to spend some time as well with families and parents and carers. But I think it's time well invested, and that return, really, the yield you get from parental engagement is so important. It can really make a difference to a child's life. So I think the way that's achieved is different in different schools, but we'd like to see more of it. I think that's what I'm saying.
okay, thanks, Wendy. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Chair, I mean,
Helen.
I'd certainly echo that as cabinet member. There's some excellent examples of where this has been developed using pupil development grant funding. I think we looked at that, the old PDC looked at that in the past. It became very clear that there was some very good practice in early years and the earliest period of a child's education, and that establishing the positive relationships early on paid dividends throughout a child's period in school. So I think those there's that practice out there. What we want to try and make sure, as with other things, is that there is a consistent and high quality practice across all schools in Swansea, and that's something we're aiming at, Yvonne.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks.
Thank you, Yvonne. So I don't see anybody else indicated on screen. I don't know if there's anyone in the room. There's nothing in the chat. We are looking content. So can I, my last comment that I would offer on this is under section 2, strengthening school leaders. It relates to some of the questions that we've had from committee members today. When we looked at schools as learning organisations, the point was made that it's pupils, staff, parents, local communities and businesses all in it together. And that ethos is so important. The foundation of educational excellence involves all of those key partners stepping together. So on that point, are we content to accept the recommendations? Can I have a show of hands? Thank you, Jan. Anyone to second? Thank you, Yvonne. That's lovely. And Sam, thank you very much indeed. So everyone, I think on that point, and I've lost my agenda, I think on that point, we come to the end of the series of meetings for this municipal year. That's why I had a query the other day. That's why we don't have a work plan, because we completed the work plan for the current municipal year. And I'd like to thank you all for your commitment, for your attendance, for your intelligence, your insight and your enthusiasm. Cabinet member Robert Smith, your attendance as ever has been very much appreciated. Helen as the director and all officers who supported the committee. This has been a collaborative effort, a joint effort and a commitment which has resulted in a very positive direction, a good, strong, solid report to Cabinet. So can I thank you all very much for your attendance and commitment throughout the year. And on that point, I call the meeting to a close. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.